This is from, let's see, Medino. I'm not really sure if I pronounced that right. Probably didn't. But she seems very confused over our relationship and about whether or not, Olivia and I consider ourselves lesbians and how we identify and how all that works. Just from my aspect, honestly, I don't get caught up in all that too much. I love Olivia. I'm very attracted to her. I think we have great chemistry, and to me, that's all that really matters. But if you really want to have to put a label on it, I would say it is much more like a lesbian relationship than anything else. In relationships, I definitely, the female part of me is definitely the very strong part in the romantic aspect of it. So I would say I feel more like a lesbian than any other label. And I think most of the girls I've dated would probably tell you the same thing. So at least from my perspective, that's how I feel. And like I said, in the future, Olivia can expound on all that too. Erin Viliestra. She asked, do you think living in Michigan it's harder to find a community versus other states as a transgender woman? I think that varies a lot just on the area within the state as well. The more rural you get, it becomes more difficult because there's less diversity, less people, and in bigger urban areas, you see more diversities, and I think that almost applies everywhere. In general, the Midwest can be a little tougher, but I don't think it's terrible. Michigan has some very LGBT-friendly areas. I lived in the Ann Arbor area for 9 years, and I felt very comfortable there. There's other communities like Ferndale and Royal Oak that are very welcoming, and then there's other parts of the state that aren't. But overall, I really like it here. I've met a lot of great people. I think almost everywhere there's pockets for us that are very welcoming and other areas that are more challenging. Lawrence Welchenow asks, what do you personally feel is the biggest social stigma affecting the gender fluid non-binary community? I would say the biggest stigma for those communities is that a lot of people don't see it as a legitimate identity, and oh, that's just made up, there's no such thing, and the whole, oh, you're just looking for attention, trying to be different. But really, I think there's, anyone is entitled to identify any way they want, and if that's how they feel comfortable identifying and that's the way that best describes themselves, then I think everyone, needs to respect that. And for myself, identifying as trans and non-binary and gender fluid, the reason I use all the things because I think that's what best describes me. I definitely identify, largely as female, but then also I use the other definitions because I don't feel like it's so cut and dry. It's a little blurrier. And I blur those lines. The non-binary, I feel like, I kind of blur both worlds a little bit, and non-binary definitely feels appropriate for me as well. And then the gender fluidity, there is a degree of fluidity to my gender, and sometimes that's even difficult for me. Sometimes I just feel extremely feminine, sometimes more masculine, and it can depend on the situation, can depend on the day, sometimes just over time. I can't really, fully explain how all that happens, but it does, and it's just part of my life and who I am, and I don't think there's anything wrong with using those type of identifiers to describe who I am. Beyond the Bus Stop asks, do your kids still call you dad? Yeah, most of the time they still do call me dad, and that's fine. Most of the time if they do refer to me as mom, it's when we're in public and I'm presenting very feminine. But honestly, we do that more for other people than for ourselves. It doesn't really matter to me what they call me, or I know that bond is there regardless. So if I'm all dolled up, like wearing a dress and heels and in full makeup, calling me dad sometimes creates awkward situations. So then they'll refer to me as mom, but most of the time in private, dad. And I think that's just because that was for so many years of their life, and the way we lived, that was just a more natural thing to do, and I think that's just carried on. But it doesn't really imply anything one way or the other. And I don't think it really matters to them or matters to me. MW Make Art asks, what, besides the gym, is your happy place that is just for you? I would say nature, and specifically water. I love the beach, I love rivers, lakes, ponds, the ocean. Any type of water, I'm drawn to it. Always have been. I've always just felt a strong pull towards it. It's always had a mysterious quality for me, but also inviting, but yet there's a little bit of danger to it somehow. When I'm in Toronto visiting Olivia, right now she lives right on the lake. I love to go out first thing in the morning, and especially in the fall, when the water's cold, and meditate in the water. That's definitely a happy place for me, and someplace I feel very calm and at peace. All Things Adrian asks, what is your opinion on parents allowing their minor children to take estrogen and testosterone? I think there's a lot of misinformation with this, and I think there's a lot of confusion. Actually, no one that I know of, no legitimate medical organization allows like young children to start testosterone and estrogen. This isn't until none of this happens until the child be entering puberty anyway, and when their body would normally be producing these things. Often, what happens even when they enter puberty is they're just put on a medication called Lupron, which basically delays their puberty. And this poses very few risks and is actually very safe. And if the child does decide later on that they don't want to transition, they can just be taken off the drug and then they'll go into puberty a little bit later. But the only risk at all that poses is possible lower mineral density in their bones very late in life versus a real risk of suicide. You don't see young children being put on estrogen and testosterone at a young age. That just doesn't happen. Not saying there aren't exceptions to that, but it's very rare instances and not happening often. Urban Adventures asks, what is your favorite out of bench, squat, and deadlift, and why? Good question. I think all throughout my career, I think my favorite changed at times. It was very rewarding and felt great to hit a huge squat, especially when I broke the 1,000-pound barrier. Hitting a big bench, is always very rewarding as well. But I would say that my favorite out of the three lifts is a deadlift. I feel like it's the most raw, pure test of strength. And also it's the last lift in the meet, probably the one that's most advantageous to be the strongest at. And frequently for me, I was very often, when I was competing at the world level, I usually had the biggest deadlift. And so it was really nice to know that and great for strategy to be able to, and there's some great times where I would be behind going in the last lift and then be able to pull my way to the win. So that was always really, really exciting and a lot of fun. And like I said, I think the biggest thing is deadlift is such a raw, pure test of strength, and it's such a hard, grinding movement and requires a lot of mental toughness. So yeah, that's why the deadlift's my favorite.